Back to Department 1. People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chesnoff. We have Mr. Bailey and Mr. Milius at council table, and Mr. Henderson, Mr. Lewin. I see Mr. Lewis also, and Mr. Ray. All present with the defendant who's, as I said, present. It is July 14th. Happy Bastille Day, everyone.
Bonjour.
Yeah. Bonjour. One of my favorite holidays.
Yeah.
And let's see, we are in the midst of hearing from Jeanne Clarke, the recorded conditional examination.
Well, I have 2 questions for you.
Yes, Mr. Chesnoff.
Have we heard from on above when we're going to lose the masks yet?
On above. We don't, that's something that's always a matter of discussion. The presiding judge, our presiding judge, Eric Taylor, remains in dialogue with the LA County Public Health Department, and we do speak with them and with the state courts, the Chief Justice of California and the California Public Health Department. So the dialogue continues. I think now there's a surge that is affecting unvaccinated people. We can't verify who may or may not be vaccinated, so we don't know. But if you're not vaccinated, please, it's dangerous if you're not, and the vaccination gives you a lot of protection. So I do encourage you to get that. But right now we have to wear masks.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
I personally wish we didn't have to, but of course we must.
Second
Anything else?
question.
Yes.
May I go in the back and do some work while this is played? I've heard it before.
Yes, we were all there before. Mr. Chesnoff, you may be excused.
You don't want to hear it again?
No. I'll be N-O.
Yeah. Yes, well, I will, I'm happy to watch it again. Let's proceed.
Your Honor, we left off at 3635. I backed it up to 3630, and I will press play.
It's not denying having said those things, is that right?
I don't understand how it's that.
Yeah. To the best of your memory, again, maybe I'll just ask one thing before. Do you know if Mr. Durst's mail was read when he was in custody?
I believe all mail is read.
And I asked you before if you ever asked him about that, and you told me no. Do you recall that?
I know, I just assume that all mail to is read.
Well, did you ask Mr. Durst about his mail being read?
I don't know why I'm asking that, because I would assume that it is read.
Okay, 7315 at 1752 JC012, please.
121.
Okay.
Okay, now do they read your mail?
Say that again.
Do they read your mail?
I doubt it, but they say they can.
They can, well, yeah, they can. I'm sure they open it to make sure there's nothing in it that's
Yes.
not supposed to be there, of course, like a rigid blade or something.
How could they possibly read it on their mail? You know what I mean?
Well, but they might read your, I don't know.
Anyway, they could write. If they open it up, give it to me.
Mm-hmm.
You believe they do very much reading of it.
Probably not.
Now, why did you ask Mr. Durst if his mail was being read?
Because I assume that all of his mail would be read, since he is a high-profile person.
Ma'am, if you assume all his mail was being read, why did you ask him?
Maybe I wanted to get his opinion or make him aware.
Now, you wanted to make him aware that you were concerned that he might say something incriminating in his mail back and forth to you. Isn't that correct?
I don't know that. I just know. I can't say that. No.
Now, I'm not asking you if, in fact, he did say something incriminating. I'm asking you, you brought this up because you were concerned that Bob Durst might say something in the mail that was incriminating, correct?
Could be.
Ma'am, does that sound like an objective person with no interest in the case who just wants to get to the truth of what happened, as you in essence described yourself?
Your last question doesn't make sense.
Well, ma'am, I started off a while ago asking you consider yourself a neutral, unbiased witness, and you said that you did. Are you still going to stick to that? Is that still your position?
Yes,
So, do you think this comment to Mr. Durst, that somebody might be reading his mail, do you think that is a neutral and unbiased statement?
it is a comment I would make to anybody that I was a friend with.
Right, so this is a comment you make to anybody who you were concerned might incriminate themselves in a letter or mail, correct?
Yes, anybody.
And ma'am, obviously, if your goal and main concern was to see truth and justice done, you would agree you wouldn't necessarily need to tell Mr. Durst, be careful what you write, because in the end, you would just be looking for the truth. Isn't that correct?
No,
How is that incorrect, ma'am?
I had no intention but to just, I don't know. I'm too messed up, I'm sorry.
Isn't it true, ma'am, you also wanted to be able to discuss things with Mr. Durst about his case that would not be reviewed by authorities?
No,
Ma'am, you realize you're under oath, correct?
yes, but what do you mean I wanted? That makes no sense to me. How can I answer that? What do you mean I wanted to?
Well, ma'am, you're asking Mr. Durst if his mail is being read. Would you agree that a natural inference from that would be that you were concerned that something that was either being sent to him or sent out by him would be read by authorities?
No. It was a general comment I would make to anyone.
Any friend who
Any
found himself
friend, yes.
incarcerated,
Yes,
charged with murder,
charged with whatever.
did Bob Durst ever tell you that it would be very helpful if you could find someone that could testify that he didn't typically misspell the word Beverly?
Possibly.
Ma'am, as you sit here, are you concerned now that when I ask you a question, that right behind my question might be a clip that demonstrates whether you're being truthful or not? Are you considering that?
Yes.
Here's another one. Clip 004, May 10, 2015,
122.
at 1906.
I'm looking for someone who I wrote to. The only one that can think of would be you,
Okay.
my wife Debbie, or when I mailed in checks and landlord. I had a lawyer, I had a legal at that point. His name was Zach, with a Z. And I wrote to him. If I can find somebody who's got something I wrote back then, or even somebody who can say, yeah, Bob used to write to me, he wrote a couple letters, he never misspelled Beverly, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Ma'am, when Mr. Durst was asking you on that day about whether you knew of anybody who could you find someone who knew that he didn't misspell Beverly, did you understand the significance of Beverly?
Yes.
So you knew, ma'am, that the cadaver note had Beverly spelled incorrectly, is that right?
Yes.
And now, in fact, you're aware that Mr. Durst would misspell Beverly, aren't you?
No.
Ma'am, didn't you watch the Jinx?
I don't believe everything I see on TV.
Well, ma'am, you would agree that on the Jinx, Mr. Durst admits, you saw this correct? What you saw is Mr. Durst admitting that, yes, I wrote this letter, which has Beverly misspelled, but I didn't write this letter. You saw that scene, correct?
It has been 3 years since I have seen that movie, and I don't recall all the details. I'm sorry.
Wait, man, you're gonna tell us that you don't recall all the details? So you're saying it slipped your mind whether your close friend, Mr. Durst, in essence admitted a murder, and you're calling that, I don't remember all the details? Is that your testimony? Is that your testimony now?
What is the question?
Yes,
You just said you don't remember all the details of something that happened 3 years ago, correct?
Yes.
Now, isn't it true you are well aware that Mr. Durst admitted that he spelled Beverly wrong on one of the letters? You're aware of that, correct?
I don't remember whether it was he spelled it right or he spelled it wrong. I don't remember which way.
Well, so what Mr. Durst was telling you
Mm-hmm.
in this clip that I just played, that it would be very helpful. You just saw this. I'm looking for someone, right? You heard this, that can basically say that he knew how to spell Beverly, that he never misspelled it. That's what it said. That's what's up there. Correct?
Correct.
So now you're telling me that you didn't understand at the time Mr. Durst was saying this, the importance of the misspelling of Beverly?
No.
You're saying correct. You didn't misunderstand that?
Correct.
And you're also saying that even today, that's a detail that you just don't remember because it was insignificant to you. Is that your testimony, ma'am?
I'm sorry.
And as you sit here today, you're basically saying, you know, I don't remember this part of the conversation because it just wasn't a significant fact to me. That's in essence what you're saying. Is that correct?
I remember he was looking for mail, that's all.
Ma'am, when you watched the Jinx, after seeing that, did you become concerned that, oh my God, my friend might have murdered 3 people?
No.
Did you become concerned that your friend had Bob Durst killed his wife, Kathy?
No.
Did you become concerned that your friend Bob Durst had shot his best friend, Susan Berman, in the head?
No.
Did you become concerned that your friend Bob Durst had a dismembered Morris Black's corpse?
No.
So is your position, ma'am, that even after watching the Jinx, that those 3 facts, or those 3 allegations that I just brought up, were simply internet scuttlebutt, not true? Is that what your position is?
Yes.
Well, ma'am, so again, I'm asking, are you aware as you sit here today that Bob Durst has admitted that he dismembered Morris Black's body?
Yes.
Well, so ma'am, then it would appear then that when you watched the Jinx, then that was something, is that when you learned of that fact? When did you learn that Bob Durst had dismembered Morris Black's body?
I don't know. I don't know anything for sure. I only know what I read on the internet.
Well, ma'am, so here's my question. I would assume that if the first time you found out that Bob Durst dismembered Morris Black's corpse was when you watched the Jinx, you would remember that. Would you agree?
Probably.
Wait, probably, ma'am? So,
I'm going to adjourn these proceedings until Thursday, 3rd, and I will direct the witness not to discuss your testimony with any other witness until your testimony is completed. And I will be returned on May 3rd. All right, then, Department. Right, Ms. Clarke, do the witness stand, and Ms. Clarke, I'll remind you that you remain under oath. Mr. Lewin, you may continue with your examination.
thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, since you were in court, I think maybe 2 weeks to the day, have you thought at all about your testimony and the answers that you previously gave?
Yes.
Given that you've had the chance to think about it, just as you sit here right now, are there any answers that you can think of that you would like to either change or modify or augment?
I can't think of anything right at the moment.
Is it your position, you had testified before, is it your position that you still found out about Kathy's disappearance, not from Mr. Durst directly, but from either the news or the internet, as you testified previously?
Yes, it is.
And as you sit here, do you have any idea when it was that you found out this information?
No.
If I were to ask you, you certainly knew about it, you would agree, in 2015, when you were talking to Mr. Durst while he was in jail, is that correct?
Yes.
So if I were to ask you, any idea, did you find out closer to when you first met him, or did you find out after he was arrested? When approximately do you think you found that out?
Are you talking about arrested this time, or?
Yeah, so I'm talking about Mr. Durst was arrested in March of 2015. You're aware of that, correct?
Yes.
And you ended up having some conversations with him while he was in Louisiana in custody. Do you recall that?
When he was arrested, I was in Hong Kong.
Right, no, I'm saying after his arrest, you're aware that he remained in Louisiana for an extended period of time.
Yes.
Oh, and unfortunately, you need to say yes or no, because the court reporter can't get.
Yes.
So during this time, you had a conversation with him periodically, is that right?
Yes.
And you would agree that at a certain point during those conversations, you were clearly aware of the allegations regarding Mr. Durst's missing wife, his best friend's murder, and the killing of his member in Morris Black, is that right?
Yes, I saw it on TV when I was in Hong Kong.
Okay, when were you in Hong Kong?
In March. Actually, I just left Hong Kong on a cruise ship, and I turned on my TV in my stateroom the first time, and he popped up.
So is it your position that prior to that time in Hong Kong, you had no idea that Mr. Durst's wife was missing?
No, I never watched TV until I was leaving.
Okay. And you had no idea that he was a suspect in Susan Berman's death?
I don't think so. I just saw something on CNN. There was very little television reception in Hong Kong that was in English.
Now, if you could give an estimate, and I want to talk about prior to Mr. Durst being in custody, how many times do you think you saw or spent time with him in person prior to that time?
I had not seen him for 6 months, or not for 6 months.
Right, and I'm not asking you how long it had been. I'm asking you how many times prior to his arrest, since you've known him, do you think you physically spent time with him? Do you understand my question?
No.
Okay, let me ask again. So, I'm not asking you when you spent time with him. I'm asking, since you met him, how many times have you physically spent time with him? How many different? 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 50 times?
10?
Okay. And is it fair to say, ma'am, that you've had dozens of phone conversations with him?
Yes.
So now, is it your testimony that during all of these calls and all the times you've seen him, that the first time that you've ever had any knowledge about his missing wife, his murdered best friend, and the killing of his member of Morris Black was when you watched the thing in Hong Kong? That's the first time?
No.
Okay, so when is it, ma'am, that you first became aware? That's what I asked you a couple minutes ago.
Okay, I have to go back in my mind and figure out years. Maybe 2012.
And do you know how it was that you discovered these three things that I just mentioned about his missing wife, his murdered best friend?
Yes, on TV and the internet.
Okay. And I would assume, ma'am, when you saw that, did you have a conversation ever with Mr. Durst about it?
No.
Ma'am, between the time that you first met him and the time that you read this stuff on the internet, had it ever come up at all that Mr. Durst had been married before?
Yes,
Okay, what did he tell you about his wife, Kathy, the person he'd been married to?
he did not speak about her.
Well, you said it came up, so if you can, ma'am, please tell me everything you can remember that Bob Durst told you about Kathy Durst.
I think he just told me he had been previously married.
So he never mentioned to you that his wife had disappeared, never to be found again?
No,
When you watched the internet and you heard that allegation, was your first response, there's no way that could have been true because he would have told me?
no, my thinking is you are innocent until proven guilty.
Now, I'm not asking you whether or not Mr. Durst is innocent or guilty. I'm saying...
And I'm not answering that.
So, ma'am, this is my question. You meet a man at, basically, it's a singles group, correct?
Correct.
You're going to that singles group because you're hoping you might find somebody you're compatible with, correct?
Part of the reason.
And, ma'am, would it be fair to say that in assessing compatibility, someone who's a suspect in murdering his wife, that might influence whether or not you're looking at this guy as companion material?
You're going to repeat it.
Okay, ma'am, you're going to a singles group. You're looking to meet a man, and you're telling me that you did not believe that it was a significant thing to inquire as to whether or not this man had killed his prior wife when you were aware of that rumor and allegation. I'm asking why.
No, because my intention of going to that singles group was socializing, not just meeting a man. I made also a lady friend that I was doing activities with also.
So now, even as you sit here today, I just want your testimony would be that Mr. Durst's alleged history of being a suspect in the disappearance of his wife, the murder of his best friend, and the killing and dismemberment of Morris Black, that was information that you did not think was really relevant to any relationship you might have had with Mr. Durst. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Ma'am, as you answer that question, does that seem strange to you?
No,
Can you explain why?
because the singles group was just to socialize and meet other singles. And I also met women there that I socialized with.
When you flew to Houston, you stayed at Mr. Durst's residence, correct?
Correct.
By that point in time, you were already well aware of the rumor, the internet information about his missing wife and the murder of Susan Berman and the killing and dismemberment of Morris Black, correct?
Repeat the question.
When you went and stayed with Mr. Durst in Houston, by that time, you were already aware of this information regarding Mr. Durst's past.
Yes, but it was just gossip in the internet.
Well, ma'am, you're aware that Mr. Durst, during his trial in 2003, admitted to dismembering, cutting up Morris Black's body. You're aware of that, correct?
Yes,
So you would agree that wasn't just the internet scuttlebutt, right?
it was things I saw in the internet, the news, whatever.
Now, what I'm asking you is, you knew that that was a true fact, correct?
Maybe I didn't think it was true, I don't know.
Well, ma'am, so prior to going to Houston, you're going to be staying with the man. Wouldn't you have wanted to say to him, hey, Bob, gosh, I'm reading on the internet, it says you killed your neighbor and you hacked him up. Something you might have asked him, or not something you were concerned with?
No, I did not ask that.
In hindsight, is that something that, gosh, you know what, I might ask that question.
No,
Can you tell me why?
because I completely that was not affecting my decision. I was not concerned with it.
Ma'am, have you dated any other individuals who wives disappeared, suspect in their best friend's murder, and admittedly killed and dismembered their neighbor?
Not to my knowledge.
Would that be for you if I were to tell you, hey, we have mystery man X behind the curtain there. He's interested in dating Miss Clarke. This is his history. Would that probably rule him out for romantic relationship with you or not?
You're kind of mixing this up.
Ma'am, what facts am I mixing up? Please.
Okay, when I met Mr. Durst, I knew nothing of a background. You're presenting someone that the background is not.
But ma'am, my question to you was, you found out about his background, and your response to that was, according to you, not to ask him word one about it, but instead to go down to Texas and spend time with him in his residence.
That's true.
So I'm asking you to explain that.
I cannot explain it.
Okay, let me move on. Since you previously testified, have you had any written or oral communication or communication in any way, shape, or form with any of Mr. Durst's attorneys?
No,
Since your testimony, have you in any way communicated by phone, by letter, in any way with Mr. Durst?
no,
Have you sent him any letters?
no,
Since your testimony, have you had a chance to review any transcripts of either the quote jail calls previously or from your testimony a couple of weeks ago?
no.
As you sit here, when is the last conversation or contact you remember having with Mr. Durst?
I believe it was last summer.
And was that by phone or was that by letter?
That was a visit.
And ma'am, how many letters do you think you've written to Mr. Durst since he's been in custody?
2.
2. Do you remember when the last letter you wrote to him was?
No.
What law he was in Los Angeles or was in?
It would be in New Orleans.
So I want to go back to Mr. Durst's wife, Kathy. And you mentioned a moment ago that he did mention that he had been married. Is there anything else that he ever said about Kathy Durst?
No.
When I say the name Deborah Chilton, do you know who that is?
Yes.
And has Mr. Durst ever spoken about her?
Yes.
Were you aware when you began your relationship with Mr. Durst that he was married?
No.
How did you find out that he was married?
I'm not sure either in the internet or he may have mentioned it.
And I would assume when you found out he was married, did you ask him about that?
Probably, yes.
Well, when you say probably, ma'am, wouldn't you have a pretty clear memory of, yeah, I'm seeing this man and I find out he's married, yeah, I remember talking about it.
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell me what was the substance of that discussion?
Not much because he was in LA and she was in New York.
Okay, so he basically represented to you that they were married, but they were kind of leading separate lives?
That was obvious, yes.
Anything else that you can remember that he said about Kathy Durst in particular?
No.
Did he ever mention that she was finishing up medical school?
I believe he said that she was going to medical school, yes.
And did he mention to you at all how it was that the two of them kind of went separate ways?
No.
So you had no idea that his wife had disappeared?
Only from the internet.
So you never asked Mr. Durst anything about the disappearance of his wife, Kathy, is that correct?
No, I never asked him about it. Absolutely not.
Have you ever spoken to him about Susan Berman?
No.
Do you know who Susan Berman is?
Yes, I do.
And who do you know her to be?
Somebody who lived in LA that was a writer,
And when did you find out about Susan Berman, who she was?
because she writes books. and she's in the internet.
So, the first time you heard about Susan Berman, was it in the context of the internet and discovering that Mr. Durst was a suspect in her murder?
Yes,
And you found this out many years before his arrest, is that correct?
you mean the arrest 3 years ago in March?
Yes.
Yes,
And are you able to give us any indication, to the best of your memory, of approximately when you would have found this out?
no,
And as you sit here today, how certain are you that you've never discussed Susan Berman with Mr. Durst at all?
I never discussed her with him.
Are you certain?
Yes,
Let's play, please, JC007. This is the 5/20/15 phone call at 8:23 p.m. This is at the 8-minute and 22-second mark, roughly.
Equals 123 and 123A respectively.
Thank you.
And so what did David ask you about?
He asked me how I met you.
He wants to see if you're a plot,
And I'm a what?
like a government killed you. What else did he ask you about?
He asked me how I met you, and I told him about the single gourmet. And he talked a lot about nothing. He talked about Chicago, you know. He had just been in Hong Kong the same time I was. You know, that was a coincidence.
So you could have gotten together in Hong Kong.
Yeah, right. We didn't know. But yeah, he just asked me if I had been to Houston.
He asked you what?
If I had been to Houston.
If you had been what?
To Houston.
To Houston.
Yes.
You said yes.
Yes.
Apologize, Your Honor.
And so what did David ask you about?
He asked me how I met you. He, I don't know. He asked me if you had talked about to Houston.
To Houston.
Yes.
You said yes.
Yes. Yes.
To Bob in Houston. We went out to dinner twice. The first place was good, and the second place was terrible.
Yes. Yeah, but he, I don't know. He asked me if you had talked about, what's her name? The one that your case is about.
Susan Berman.
Yes. He asked me that. And I said, no, we hadn't discussed her that much.
Yeah, that was before anything had happened.
Yeah. And he talked about her. He knows her.
David knew Susan Berman?
Yes, yes. Because he worked as a reporter, and they were both in San Francisco.
I had no idea that she worked as a reporter.
Ma'am, do you recognize that was your voice, right?
yeah, sure,
And that was Mr. Durst, correct?
yes,
And you were talking about David Feckheimer, who's Mr. Durst's investigator.
yes,
Oh, if you can, ma'am, if I can just finish my question. I know you know where I'm going, but just so it's easier on the court reporter, if you can just wait until I stop and then respond.
okay,
In that little clip I just played you, it said that he asked me if you had talked to him about what's her name, the one that your case is about. And you said, yes, he asked me that. I said, we hadn't discussed her that much. Well, now, you just said a moment ago that you've never discussed her at all.
well, I'm saying, that's what I'm saying, we haven't discussed her, that's what I would interpret that to mean.
No, ma'am. If I said, have you ever discussed her? You said no. I asked you again, have you ever discussed her? You said no. In that clip, you said that much. So I want to know, what is the that much that you and Mr. Durst discuss with him?
I have no idea. I don't remember, and it was not significant.
Well, ma'am, it was apparently significant enough for you to tell Mr. Durst that you added the words that much. You have no idea why you said that?
I have no idea why I said that. It's just conversation.
Ma'am, if Mr. Durst had told you something incriminating about Susan Berman and his involvement in her murder, would you tell us?
Yes.
I want to talk about Stuart and Emily Altman for a moment. Do you know who they are?
I think they're friends of his.
And by his, you mean Mr. Durst?
Mr. Durst, yes.
Has he ever spoken about them to you?
Yes, he said they lived in the country in New York, I believe.
Has he ever discussed the nature of his relationship with Stuart Altman?
No.
Do you remember ever him telling you about, do you remember, excuse me, motion to strike my last question, withdraw. Did Mr. Durst ever tell you that Stuart was more of a friend than a lawyer?
I think he was a friend and a lawyer, yes.
No, I'm asking, did Mr. Durst specifically tell you that Stuart Altman was really more of a friend than a lawyer?
Maybe, I don't remember.
JC 11, call 7315 and 1752, between 6 minutes and 6 minutes and 19 seconds.
It was 124 and 124 A.
Oh, your friend was talking to the attorney. One of your attorneys was talking very well about you. Did you see that?
Stuart knew me all, they're my oldest, and I know him from high school, believe it or not.
Uh-huh.
He's a lawyer. He's not doing much of his stuff. He's more of a friend than a lawyer.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, but I didn't remember it at the moment now because that's many years ago.
Oh, no.
I don't remember.
I'm just asking if, but
That does, but I did not remember that conversation. I mean, that's probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago. I don't remember
a
everything.
little less than 3, but
No,
July
I-
3rd, 2015.
Now that you play it, yes, but I did not remember that.
And ma'am, you were talking about having seen Mr. Altman on a Dateline, correct?
Yes, on TV.
So you watched everything that you can see involving Mr. Durst, correct?
Not everything, no.
Mr. Durst, in fact, asks you to watch or to read whatever's out there so you can give him reports of what the coverage is, correct?
No, I watch some things or read some things. I don't read everything. I couldn't possibly know everything that was out there.
Did Mr. Durst ever further discuss his relationship with Emily Altman?
No.
Did he ever tell you that only Stuart can see him in person, but that Emily can't?
No, I don't remember anything like that at all.
Were you aware that the Altmans were on Dateline June 20, 2015?
I vaguely remember they were on TV, yes.
Do you remember Mr. Durst discussing their appearance on Dateline?
I don't remember, no. I know that they were on Dateline. I don't remember the details.
Clip JC 010 53015 1757.
And your Honor, may I remark this is 125 and 129 A.
On June 18th, Dateline is doing something about me. My friend Stuart and Emily Altman are honest. They agreed to be honest.
You agreed to be honest?
What?
You agreed to be on Dateline?
I didn't agree. My friend Stuart and Emily Altman agreed to go on Dateline.
And who is he?
He's a lawyer and old friend. They're both very old friends. Went to high school with him.
Okay, so he agreed to be on Dateline. Okay.
So, and they- on Dateline. Talk about being one of the people. Curious.
Well, they won't get me on anything. June 18th, okay. I will watch it and report to let you know.
Does that refresh your memory, ma'am?
I guess so, yeah, I don't remember all these details of all these things.
You would agree, ma'am, that you and Mr. Durst were having a conversation in advance of the Dateline episode.
I guess so.
And you would agree, ma'am, that Mr. Durst at no point said to you, you know what? I can't believe that my lawyer's going on Dateline, or I don't want him going on Dateline. Is that correct?
I don't think that's what he's saying, I'm being a monitor.
No, I'm not asking, I'm saying, to the best of your memory, ma'am, Mr. Durst never said to you, I can't believe that Stuart and Emily Altman went on Dateline.
Apparently, I think he said it there.
Let me know when you're ready.
Nobody's saying I'm not surprised that they agreed.
Right, and ma'am, to the best of your memory, can you ever recall Mr. Durst expressing any anger or any concern or any problem with the Altmans having gone on Dateline?
It doesn't seem like it because I don't remember what they said now, and I haven't seen it from here, so to refresh my memory.
So as you sit here, to the best of your memory, ma'am, would it be a true statement that Mr. Durst was aware that the Altmans were going on Dateline
Yes.
and did not seem to have any problem with it, correct?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what he said there. But that's the only conversation he probably had about them.
So then your answer, ma'am, would be, to the best of your memory, Mr. Durst never has expressed to you any anger, concern, issue, problem with the Altmans having gone on Dateline. Is that
Not
correct?
that I remember.
Now, in that clip, you said, let me get this quote right. There we go. Well, they won't get me on anything. What did you mean by that?
That means I would never go on TV or go on Dateline, or I wouldn't want the publicity. I just don't want, I would not want to go on a TV program or talk to newspaper people or even the district attorney.
Man, that's not what you said, though, correct? That's not what you said.
Well, what am I saying?
You're saying, well, they won't get me on anything. I want to know, what does that mean?
It means I would not go on a Dateline or a TV show or talk to the news.
Now, doesn't that in fact mean that you're telling Mr. Durst that you're smart enough that you would never say anything that might possibly be incriminating?
No, I am saying I don't want the publicity. I don't care to be on TV. I'm a private person, and I have no reason to call attention to myself.
But of course, those things that you just mentioned, you didn't say here, correct?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand you. You've got too much going on. That is past history that I don't remember, and I cannot discuss this with you intelligently.
Has Mr. Durst ever referred to Emily as anything other than his close friend?
He hadn't referred to her as hardly anything.
Now, listen to my question.
No,
Listen to my question, please. Has Mr. Durst ever referred to Emily Altman as anything other than an old friend?
no.
And ma'am, do you recall speaking to Mr. Durst about Emily's testimony?
I don't remember it, no.
Do you recall, ma'am, 1 second. Do you recall Mr. Durst describing Emily as a friend of mine from way back, who is my age and is going to testify for the DA? Do you recall that?
I don't know exactly what he said, but he probably said something.
Did Mr. Durst ever tell you that any of Emily's testimony that she gave on the initial examination was false?
No.
He basically, would you agree, ma'am, when you have spoken to her, he has referred to her JC 18, 731 to 17.
Your Honor, may that be Equals 126 and 126A?
Ma'am, you spoke to Mr. Durst while Emily Altman, or after she had testified, while she was testifying or after she was testifying, correct, about her testimony?
What year are you referring to?
July 31st, 2017.
2017. Last year, I believe.
You don't recall that, ma'am?
No, I don't believe I spoke to him that many times in the last several years.
Okay. JC 18, Your Honor, has indicated 731-17.
So what's going on today?
Ma'am, would you agree, ma'am, that he is calling her a hostile witness, but he is not saying that anything she has testified to is untrue, correct?
That's what it sounds like when I read this, but these conversations are a long time ago. I don't believe everyone remembers every conversation they have on their phone calls. So if I didn't read this, I would never remember this conversation.
Now, so my question to you is simply this. To the best of your memory, Mr. Durst has never said to you, you know what? The things Emily Altman testified to are untrue. Never said that to you, has he?
I don't remember, no.
Ma'am?
I don't remember it, so I'm assuming he didn't.
Ma'am, do you know who Nick Chavin is?
Who?
Nick Chavin?
No,
Has Mr. Durst ever talked to you about him?
no. Obviously, I don't remember his name, so
So you're saying as you sit here today, you have no idea who Nick Chavin is?
I can't remember people I met 5 minutes ago their names, so I certainly don't remember all these names, and I do not know who he is.
Ma'am, when I say the term, this is a quote, "It was her or me." Is that a quote you're aware of?
No.
Ma'am, so what I'm asking you is you're telling me that you were unaware that Nick Chavin came into this court a little over a year ago and testified that Bob Durst confessed to murdering Susan Berman. You're not aware of that?
Absolutely not. I don't know who he is. I know nothing of his testimony.
So ma'am, you have not been reading about Mr. Durst's appearances in the paper?
No, not all the time. I didn't even know they were all in the paper.
Ma'am, but in one of the calls I played for you a moment ago, you asked Mr. Durst, so what's going on in court, correct?
Yeah, that's just, small talk.
And so you had no idea that Bob Durst and Nick Chavin were very close friends?
I don't remember who Nick Chavin is.
Are you familiar with the movie All Good Things?
Yeah.
And you were aware that that's a movie that was based on Mr. Durst, is that correct?
I believe it has a trailer that says that, or maybe, I don't know.
So the answer would be yes, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
And ma'am, would you agree that in that movie, when you watch it, that Mr. Durst is portrayed, his character, as having personally killed or had murdered 3 people and a couple of dogs?
I haven't seen the movie for 10 years. I don't remember.
Wait, ma'am, so you're saying that you have no memory as to whether or not this movie that you saw portrayed your friend Mr. Durst as having murdered 3 people and some dogs? That's a fact.
No, I don't remember.
Is that your testimony, ma'am?
Yes, it is.
You agree that Mr. Durst has told you that he liked the movie, correct?
No. You may have it recorded somewhere. It may be true, but I do not remember all these day-by-day conversations for the last 10 years.
Ma'am, when you said you saw the movie, correct? You said you saw it.
Yes.
Well, ma'am, when you saw it, did you at some point say to Mr. Durst, "My God, Bob, is any of this true?"
No, because I think he was in New York.
Ma'am, you've had many conversations with him, and you've seen him many times. You've talked on the phone with him many times since you saw All Good Things, correct?
Yes, I did not discuss the movie with him that I recall or ever remember doing.
Why?
Because it's just a Hollywood movie.
Ma'am, were you aware in advance that Mr. Durst was cooperating with Andrew Jarecki and Mark Sperling regarding the making of what became Jinx?
No.
When did you find out that he had done interviews with him?
In March, just before I was going on vacation, he called to tell me that the Jinx would be on TV.
And then you testified that at some point you saw 5 of the 6 episodes, correct?
Correct.
And do you know when you watched those?
When they were on HBO.
They were first shown on HBO, ma'am, starting in February of 2017, and the last episode aired the Sunday, the next day after Mr. Durst was arrested. So I'm asking, did you watch it back then, or did you watch it later?
I did not watch the last episode because I was in Hong Kong.
So you watched the first 5 when they originally aired, correct?
4 or 5, yeah, because I was leaving.
And ma'am, again, would you agree that in those 5 episodes you watched, Mr. Durst was in essence being accused of having murdered 3 people?
I don't know if he was being accused.
JC 023, this was your testimony, ma'am. This is only 2 weeks ago, from April 19, 2018, page 178, lines 19 through page 179, line 31.
And Your Honor, may I remark this was books 127, 127A.
Now, do you agree that in those 5 episodes that you watched after this phone call, that show had depicted Bob Durst, your friend, this guy's murder trial?
Objection, Your Honor, the fact that whether the depictor didn't depict his conclusion or has to be drawn from something other than just somebody's his opinions or
Oh, is that what it did?
I guess so, yeah.
Ma'am, I just asked the same question now, and you're answering.
Wait a minute.
Ma'am, I'm not done with my question.
All right.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
I just asked you the same question I asked you 2 weeks ago. Are you aware that your answers are different?
No, because it looks like I'm very unsure of what I'm saying. I'm just like disgusted and you're badgering me, so I'm just saying anything.
Ma'am, you also testified on April 19, 2018, that even after watching those 5 episodes of Jinx, that the allegations from that show that Mr. Durst killed his wife, murdered Susan Berman, and killed his member, Morris Black, were simply internet scuttlebutt. You recall that testimony?
Yes.
Well, ma'am, in the Jinx, Mr. Durst went through discussing at length how he killed and dismembered Morris Black. You recall that, correct?
I don't think I watched that part. I don't watch that on TV.
Well, ma'am,
It gets to be where it's unpleasant, I just get past it.
so ma'am, so what you're telling me is that you watched the 5 episodes, but the gory parts where Mr. Durst is describing killing and dismembering Morris Black, you didn't watch. Is that correct?
I'm not sure, that could have happened.
Well, ma'am, you would agree that you would have had to watch some of it to have known, you know what, I don't want to watch anymore. She clearly had to be aware that that was depicted. Is that correct? And ma'am, would you agree that Mr. Durst was very clearly admitting that Morris Black had been shot and that he had dismembered it?
No, that was a Hollywood movie.
That was all. Now, are you aware that Mr. Durst not only admitted it during that interview, but testified at his Galveston trial that he had dismembered Morris Black?
Yes, I would say so.
Well, so ma'am, when you're saying that was just a Hollywood movie, you knew that in 2003, years before the Jinx ever came out, actually 2002 or 2003, that Mr. Durst, while in trial, had gone through explaining how he had dismembered Morris Black.
You are going back and forth between a movie and a trial, and it's too confusing to understand what you're depicting.
Ma'am, this is my question. You just told me that everything about Morris Black was simply internet scuttlebutt.
Yes.
Well, ma'am, is internet scuttlebutt if Mr. Durst is testifying under oath that that's what he did?
I actually did not see that because I don't believe I even knew Mr. Durst at that time, so I would not be
Ma'am,
related to it.
ma'am, I'm not asking you if you saw the trial happen live. I'm asking you, making clear here, you were aware, ma'am, that Mr. Durst had admitted while testifying in his trial that he had killed and dismembered Morris Black, correct?
Correct.
So when you said repeatedly during your testimony that everything about Morris Black and dismemberment was just internet scuttlebutt, just trying to get you to admit that you knew, ma'am, that that was factually true from Mr. Durst's own mouth, correct?
I don't know.
Ma'am, have you talked specifically about the Jinx with Mr. Durst while you've been in jail, other than what I have played to you thus far? Any other conversations you can recall?
No, because there's not enough, you cannot talk that long, they just cut you off, so there's very little discussion on the telephone calls.
Did you ever talk to him about the handwriting stuff with the Jinx?
No.
Ma'am, you watched the 5 episodes of the Jinx you testified to. Are you aware, ma'am, that Mr. Durst was shown a letter which he admitted that he wrote? Do you recall that scene where Mr. Durst is shown a letter?
No, I don't remember that part of the Jinx.
Do you remember anything about Mr. Durst being confronted with a letter and then comparing it to the, what we call the cadaver note?
Nothing.
Have you ever talked to Mr. Durst about the handwriting issues in this case during your jail conversations?
No, I don't think so.
5/10/15/1906, approximately 1 minute 37, where it starts, JC 003.
And Your Honor, I would mark this as equals 128 and 128.
Yes.
You know, my whole big trial thing and everything is going to be about my handwriting. Did you see the
Yes, uh-huh. Yes.
The whole thing is going to deal with my handwriting and whether I spell Beverly, Beverly, or Ley.
Yes.
Do you ever remember me writing anything to you?
Yes.
Did I always misspell Beverly?
No, I don't know that.
Say that again.
No, I do not know that you misspelled Beverly.
Well, in the HBO thing, that was a great big deal.
I saw that. Mm-hmm. I saw that, yes.
We're talking at the same time, it's not working.
Okay.
So the HBO thing, the 5th episode, has me writing a note spelling Beverly, Beverley. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that on TV.
Yes. So do you remember me writing Beverly the right way or the wrong way?
I don't know.
But I probably never wrote anything to you, at least on the phone all the time.
I think you did send me something once, yeah. But I remember you living there on Maple Street.
Right, you got it all.
And you don't remember that?
Of course, I don't remember you being on Maple. Well, actually, I do. You parked in front, then we drove in my car to the opera. Is that what we did?
Yes, uh-huh.
That's where I lived for almost a year and a half. What I'm trying to do is see if I can find somebody I wrote to. I don't think I ever got stationery for Beverly Hills. It was just a rental. I didn't think I'd be there that long. I must have written letters to somebody, even though I'm not much of a letter writer, where I put the return address. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Let's take our break. Ladies and gentlemen, do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We'll return at 10:45.
I had something to put on the record regarding the next witness. It'll take about...
After the jurors depart?
I can't. Was your report want
Yeah.
to do now? Or,
No, we'll excuse our jurors, and then
Okay.
you can take care of that. Our jurors have left the courtroom. Yes, Mr. Louie?
Your Honor, Attorney Ben Oster, O-S-T-R-E-R, who is Susan Giordano's lawyer, he is not licensed in the state of California, but is here accompanying her. He was present when I conducted the interview with detectives in New York in April 2015. As the court is aware, Ms. Giordano testified on February 15, 2017 in an examination in the court. I've spoken to Mr. Oster, and Mr. Oster is concerned that potentially there could be issues of self-incrimination related to Ms. Giordano's testimony today. In doing all of the research, the statements that she made originally in court were made in February of 2017. If we assume that she committed perjury at that point in time, the statute of limitations has run. I will further indicate that the people in no way will be prosecuting her, assisting in any prosecution of Ms. Giordano for any prior statements that she has made. Obviously, she needs to be truthful during her testimony today. In addition, if she made any untruthful statements in 2015 to the FBI agents who interviewed her, the statute of limitations has also run on any crimes relating to that. I'm merely putting this on the record so that Ms. Giordano is in the position that she understands, similar to the Bill Cosby situation to some degree, that she will be coming in and testifying in reliance on the idea that there is no potential perjury issue for her relating to her prior statements as indicated. The difference is that we'd be out of statute anyway. So I just wanted to put that on the record, let the court know that was how we were proceeding.
All right, thank you. Mr. Oster is not a California lawyer, so he may need local counsel if there's an issue. But thanks for making that record.
Yeah,
Yes?
yeah, one other thing, I apologize,
Yes.
Mr. Osterman. There was also money transactions. So in 2015, as the court's aware, Mr. Durst was sent a large amount of money by Ms. Giordano, more than $100,000, to New Orleans right before his arrest. Ms. Giordano has indicated that she picked up the bag and sent it, but has denied any knowledge that the money was in there. Again, the statute of limitations has also run on those crimes as well. It's been more than 6 years.
When you say crimes, you mean money laundering?
Correct. If there was what it would be is, I think the crime would be that she did not declare that she was sending that amount of money in the mail. And again, she is at risk of no jeopardy regarding any testimony regarding that at this point in time. And she's also not at risk. I didn't ask her about that in 2017, so there would be no issue of any perjury.
Well, thanks for putting that all on the record.
Sure, Your Honor.
And we'll see you at 10:45. Thank you.